Christianity is the white man's religion. Actually shows profound ignorance of African history. It is not just the ancient churches of the Christians or the Nazarenes in Africa or Ethiopia or things like that, because people will bring those examples. When you really study, look at the Solomon inscription. This is the first record of Yahweh ever, which actually comes from Egypto-Nubians. So understand what this means. The argument isn't just that ancient Africans were some of the first people to acknowledge Yahweh of the Bible, the God of the Bible. It's that the first recognition we ever have of Yahweh comes from ancient Africans. The first record we ever have in humanity that this God exists and is acknowledged comes from ancient Egypto-Nubians. You see what I'm saying? So the beauty of that is that the African spirituality conversation, because some people will say we need to go back to the religion of our ancestors, of Africans, not so-called Christianity. The reality is that no matter how far you go back, you're never going to have this African spirituality apart from a recognition of Yahweh, apart from a recognition of the God of the Israelites by native indigenous Nubians, Egyptians, Cushites, and Ethiopians, and everything like that. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of dope stuff to that trajectory. Is that as far as written history goes, you're never gonna have a period of African spirituality, African history, African deities apart from Yahweh being recognized by that same population. So that's important to say. Yahweh is the God of the Bible. This is the God that we believe in. The first recognition we have, even before our own scriptures, even before our own sacred scriptures, we have to acknowledge the first record in inscriptions was from a Nubian temple, the Solomon inscription. So it's an important thing to let the black community know, because I think it's undeniable at this point that Christianity was used as a tool for oppression. But the question is, on the other side of that, the other side of the transatlantic slave, you feel me? How are we going to move? Are we going to stop believing in Yahweh altogether when this God was first acknowledged to the world by ancient Africans? You see what I'm saying? Are we going to stop worshiping a God that was always acknowledged and first acknowledged by ancient Africans when a doctrine is perverted by people who converted hundreds upon hundreds of years after the fact? It's just something to consider. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not appealing to some doctrine or to some colonial thing that's only 100 years old. So that's why when it comes to how the God of the Bible became worshipped by the whole world, we have to look at different people and different people who do things in the name of God and see who are real and see who are bad actors. But when we come to bad actors, the question is if we're yoking ourselves to that, or if we're yoking ourselves to the truth thing, that ancient, you see what I'm saying? So it's just important to recognize. And then obviously after Christ is revealed as the Word made flesh, that's when you have all these various churches and communities of believers known as followers of the way, known as Christians, and known as Nazarenes. That's when we actually get churches come up, as after the revelation of Christ. But before that point, the same God was always recognized by indigenous Africans. And it's not just that they are recognized. There's moments where God personally reveals himself to African rulers outside of just the Israelites being scattered. That's a whole nother conversation, how the Israelites were scattered in Africa, in Kush, and things like that. How there's Israelite influence in Africa to the recognition of Yahweh, and how even many modern African churches are very Hebraic, tend to be very Hebraic because of that connection. Even outside of that, there are times, like in the Tanakh, where God himself personally reveals himself to African rulers, even to the chastisement of Hebrew rulers. So, for example, when God revealed himself to Pharaoh Necho, that against the whole thing between Pharaoh Necho and King Hosea of Israel, and God personally revealed himself to Pharaoh Necho, and Pharaoh Necho was right, as well as the Queen of Sheba coming here to see the glory of Solomon and Israel's God, for that matter. So it's not just the scattering of the Israelites, but the fact that the Yahweh himself personally revealed himself to various pharaohs and queens and kings of ancient Africa before Christ, just like he did after Christ. All right. So y'all be blessed in the Most High. Peace.